Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. We're going to keep going on the first full day of testimony in the Michael Turney case, in the missing persons case of Alyssa Turney, who has not been seen since May of 2001. But first, music fact of the day, Patsy Cline. I love Patsy Cline. I can remember listening to her with my dad's mom. I still love Patsy Cline. I've passed that down to my daughters, but she didn't care much for the rules. To the disdain of some Opry members, Patsy Cline broke gender norms by becoming the first woman to wear pants on the Grand Ole Opry stage. She petitioned to join the Grand Ole Opry, by the way. She didn't believe women in her field or any place in society needed to be submissive. You go, Patsy. She was proudly outspoken and bold. She was the first woman country singer to headline in Vegas. And even after her death, Patsy Cline continued to set records. In 1973, she became the first solo woman artist to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Her greatest hits album, released 4 years after her death, became one of the best all-time selling country records. I have that on my phone. Love it. Faded Love, She's Got You, Walking After Midnight. Oh, such good songs. Let's jump back into testimony. We're going to get into Sarah Turney's testimony. This is the biological daughter of Michael and also the biological daughter of Alyssa's mom. So Alyssa and Sarah share the same biological mom. Sarah was a product of that marriage between Michael and Alyssa's mom. So they were half sisters, 5 years apart. She's a podcaster and a TikToker. The prosecution says he doesn't know what a podcast is, so she gives him a little rundown of what we do. And she created that to specifically help with Alyssa's case. Over the years, it's grown where she spotlights other missing person cases. She started this in 2019. She said Michael would take them to school. Alyssa knew how to drive, but she was afraid to go take her driver's test. And she did ride with Alyssa sometimes, though. She said her first memory of Alyssa was dancing in their kitchen to a song by Boyz II Men, and she gets very emotional talking about this. Sarah would have been 7 at the time. She remembers that. Sarah was 4 when her mother died, and they lived in Redding, California for a period of time. Her mom's aunt lived there. They didn't have any kind of relationship with her mom's sister before Alyssa died. There was some bad blood there, apparently. They tried to meet up to reconcile, but the aunt didn't show. And I'm not sure at this point what the status of that is. She keeps in touch with the prior witness, Shay, as well. She says that she and Alyssa fought like sisters, but Alyssa was kind and protective. She realizes now as an adult, Alyssa made Christmases and birthday parties happen. She was happier outside of the house, but she took on a lot of those maternal duties. Alyssa would spend her money on other people frequently, just buying little things for her friends. She was bubbly, outgoing, and really brave. On the last day of school, when Alyssa went missing, Sarah said she had a field trip. She doesn't know how Alyssa got to school. Alyssa's school started earlier than Sarah's, so when Sarah got up that morning, Alyssa was out of the house already. Michael was supposed to pick Sarah up that day, but he didn't show. She walked home with her friends, because her house was about 3 to 4 miles away from the school to where the friend's house was just a few blocks over. When Sarah got to her friend's house, later on, her dad came and got her in a white truck. In the truck, Michael turns to Sarah and said, "Your sister isn't answering her cell phone." He hands Sarah his cell phone and asks her to try and call. There's no answer. So they go home. He never tells Sarah that he picked Alyssa up from school early or they went out to have lunch together and then got into an argument. When she gets inside the house and goes into Alyssa's room, she notices it's a little bit of a mess to where it's normally tidy. The contents of Alyssa's backpack were on the floor. It was a bunch of papers and her phone was in her room. We talked about on the last episode. They heard the vibrating on top of the dresser and found the letter Alyssa had wrote saying she was running away to California. The note said, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Dad, that's why I took $300 from you. Sarah, you always said you wanted me gone. Now you have it. Alyssa." She gets very emotional reading this letter. And like the prosecution pointed out, We don't know the circumstances in which this letter was written. It didn't really sound like something Alyssa would say. Michael gave Sarah Alyssa's cell phone shortly after she disappeared. She said Alyssa and Michael argued over everything as far back as she could remember. Michael was hypercritical of Alyssa, asking why she wasn't doing things like more cooking, driving, getting his prescriptions, things like that. Sarah said it caused a lot of constant stress and tension in the house. And as far back as she can remember, her dad recorded calls and videos. In the deep dive, if you kind of go through her podcast, this was something that was done in her dad's family as well. So this wasn't unique to Michael, but it was weird with the fact that he's putting hidden cameras inside of vents in the floor to watch Alyssa on the couch with boys. Like, that's a big red flag. She said the call recorder was very old school. It would click when the phone was answered or a call was made. Michael told Sarah about setting up the surveillance camera in the vent, and it was specifically placed there to watch Alyssa. Before Alyssa went missing, their bedrooms were on the left side of the hall in the house. When school started that fall, after Alyssa was missing in August, the rooms were changed. Sarah moved into her dad's master bedroom. He took Sarah's old room. He told Sarah the reason he switched rooms was because he didn't want to be accused of molesting her. He said he wanted her to have her own bathroom since she would have to walk around in a towel if she kept her old room. The video monitoring system was inside that master bedroom with all the monitors. They show the letter that Alyssa left on the screen. He asks if it makes sense to her, saying, "Sarah, you didn't want me around. Look, you got it." She said no, they didn't get into a fight before Alyssa disappeared. And Sarah said she didn't want Alyssa out of her life forever because she took care of her, making sure she had treatment when she had lice, making sure that was gone. She would help her pick out her clothes for school in the mornings. She taught her to do her makeup. She would make dinner, and she would help Sarah clean her room. Sarah and her dad went to California that summer at least once to look for Alyssa. They went to the mall and to the beach, but they didn't go visit her aunt. They handed out flyers at the mall, she said, for just a few minutes. Investigators took DNA from her and her brother around 2004 to 2006. It was her first contact with law enforcement since all this had happened. She was also asked to give a handwriting sample around the same time. When Sarah was 17, Michael said he couldn't handle it anymore, so Michael asked her to be the family member who keeps in contact with law enforcement and the victim's advocate. Sarah set up a meeting with two detectives shortly after she became the contact for Alyssa's case. Law enforcement wanted to get what was left of Alyssa's stuff, and she cries as she talks about wanting to keep things that were Alyssa's. She said there was barely anything left by the time law enforcement came to get it. There was a little bit of clothing, some stuffed animals, a notebook with her doodles. She said it was a tote box that was full, and that was all that was left. She told law enforcement there was lots of stuff initially because that's what she thought. Before the search warrant was executed in 2008, Phoenix police took Sarah to the station. She was not around when that was done, but she knew of the search warrant. And at that point, they were living in that house across the street from the house Alyssa lived in until she disappeared. She kept Alyssa's phone for a while, but eventually her dad switched their service to a different provider for an unlimited plan because Sarah had ran the bill up so high. She said she asked her dad many times what happened to Alyssa, and he said he would tell her on his deathbed. They met at a Starbucks in 2017 so she could get answers. This was after he was released for that 7-year prison stint for all the explosives. Sarah also did an interview with ABC for primetime about Alyssa's case. The prosecutor asks if she saw part of the broadcast showing Alyssa throwing her phone. You can hear the tires screeching from inside the courtroom. They did not put this on the screen. She said she had seen it before. Her dad had shown her. This was shortly after the incident happened, which was about a month before Alyssa went missing. They also showed her on the couch with a coworker from Jack in the Box. This video was after the fight with her boyfriend. So they're showing video that he was taking secretly from that vent. Clearly, her and the boyfriend had problems after Michael told the boyfriend Alyssa was cheating. And this guy that she was seeing from work was 20, she was 17. She talks about going paintballing in the desert. She recalls the route her dad would take, and Michael got a new truck a few months after Alyssa went missing. So on cross, this defense attorney was harsh. And I'm not sure how that's going to go over with the jury. I watch juries when you have a defense attorney that's particularly aggressive towards a living victim. And I understand that a lot of this case kind of hangs on her word. And she was the one that got the movement going again to bring awareness. But I really feel like it could backfire. Sometimes that can close a jury off. So we shall see. On cross, she said she assumes Alyssa was already gone for school when she got up to go to school herself the day Alyssa was missing. The defense says you were 12 and she was 17, and no police officer asked to talk to you until 2008. And she said that's about right, when she was 19, which would have been 7 years after Alyssa disappeared. This is when she was made the family contact. Her brother John actually was the family contact before Sarah was. Michael handed it over to him, but he did not want to deal with it, said it was too much. The brother gave power back to Michael, and then Michael transferred it to Sarah. The defense says in 2008, Michael was getting sick from stress due to the situation with Alyssa, and Sarah says yes. The defense says, you said you had a sibling rivalry, and she says nothing major. We fought back and forth. The defense says you fought a lot. You told a detective you fought all the time. You were mean to each other. She would call you fat. You would call her stupid, and it would get violent. She said, I wouldn't call it violent. And the defense says that's the word you used when you interviewed with Detective Anderson. You said she would push you against a wall. Sarah said she was under a different mindset, unfortunately, when she talked to investigators. He says, so she didn't? And Sarah said, no, she did. And I did too. It was mutual. The defense says you were jealous of each other, and you told Detective Anderson you were jealous of the attention Alyssa got, and she was jealous you were kind of left alone by your dad. Sarah agreed with that. The defense says you were 12. You weren't getting into any trouble. She said she was. And he said, you told Detective Anderson you were the sensible one. And she said, yes, that's what my dad told me. He says you lied to Detective Anderson, and she said no. He says you said Alyssa was unpredictable. She said, yeah. You said she made poor choices. Sarah said, that's what I believed. And then he said, that's what you told detectives. You said she had a temper. She was a partier. She was going out smoking marijuana. She was getting drunk. And Sarah says, yes. Alyssa never had a driver's license, but she would drive the vehicle. And Sarah said maybe once or twice. The defense says, yeah, but she drove you to get ice cream. And Sarah says, yeah, she did. The defense says, so she was doing things she wasn't supposed to do. And Sarah says that Alyssa drove with Michael's permission. The defense says the reason she didn't have a driver's license is because she failed the test. Sarah said, no, she was scared to take the test. He says she took the car sometimes without your dad's permission and without a driver's license. And Sarah says yes. What he's doing is he is bringing up every negative quality that was mentioned by Michael about Alyssa. And it's really victim blaming. It's almost like the feel I get if I'm sitting on that jury is you're trying to make it seem like her being kind of a typical teenager, kind of bucking the rules a bit, or having a strained relationship is a reason why maybe she had this coming. I just feel like that's kind of the vibe I got. That maybe is not what he is putting out there, but it's just a really slippery slope when you're aggressive with witnesses and you start pointing out all the bad qualities of somebody who is missing and presumed to be dead. He asks if she ever told Detective Anderson Alyssa had behavior issues and she got more attention because she needed it. She said yes. The defense says Alyssa's behavior was a source of great stress in the home, especially between Alyssa and Michael, and she said yes. If you're looking for the perfect heartfelt gift for a loved one, Easy Canvas Prints is the way to go. Canvas prints can be customized, and they're a unique and meaningful way to show someone that you care. Maybe you want a quality canvas print for the perfect family photo or that amazing vacation picture you took. Canvas prints are not only visually stunning, the quality is top-notch with hand-stretched canvases over durable wooden frames. Their state-of-the-art printing technology ensures vibrant colors, sharp details, and long-lasting quality. The coolest part, the canvases come ready to hang on your wall.
I have my logo printed. The colors are stunning, and it's here hanging in my studio right now. Ordering your custom canvas print is a breeze. All you do is visit easycanvasprints.com and upload your favorite photo. You can customize the size, borders, and even add a custom wooden or metallic frame to create a unique piece of art. Don't wait to elevate your home or office decor with a custom canvas print. Visit easycanvasprints.com/prettylies for a special offer for my listeners. Get unlimited 16 by 20 canvas prints for only $14.99 each. Again, that's easycanvasprints.com/prettylies. I've been using Kosas for over a month now, and I love how their makeup gives me a natural look without caked up under eye concealer or foundation that looks painted on. Kosas makes clean makeup for skincare freaks. Their complexion products are actually proven to make your skin better. They're dermatologist tested, safe for sensitive and acne-prone skin, and hypoallergenic. Kosas Revealer Concealer is not your mom's concealer. It's really creamy, weightless, and it's a total multitasker. It's a concealer, eye cream, and spot treatment in one. Revealer Concealer is packed with active skincare ingredients. It offers creaseless medium coverage with a smooth, radiant finish that looks just like your skin, just brighter, more even, and healthier. Take the 5-step shade finder quiz to find your perfect match. So don't choose between wearing great makeup and taking care of your skin. Right now, Kosas is offering my listeners 15% off your first purchase of $50 or more when you go to kosas.com/whattheworld. Go to Kosas, KOSAS.com/whattheworld for 15% off your first purchase of $50 or more, plus free shipping. That's kosas.com/whattheworld.
He tells her she used the word handful when describing her, and she said, I'd remember. She said, I don't remember, but if you say so. He says, were you aware Alyssa was diagnosed with ADD? And she says, no. He says, you told Detective Anderson that, and Sarah said, that's what I was told. The defense gets a little loud and said, you said it showed up most in her short-term memory, and she says, I don't know, that's what I was told. The defense starts yelling at her and says, at any time during these interviews, did you tell Detective Anderson that's what I was told? He says, yes or no. Sarah says, I was brainwashed by my dad to believe certain things about Alyssa. And I think that's very valid because when you're 12, I have a 12-year-old, I can probably tell her anything I want and convince her of it. I could pit her against her brother or sister if I were evil like that. Sarah grew up and Sarah started thinking about things, and that's why we're here today, essentially. The defense says your dad helped Alyssa with her homework, and she said yes, and it was regularly. He said you would do some of her homework too, and she said yep, and we would swap and do each other's homework sometime. Defense says you told Detective Anderson your dad and Alyssa would do homework in the living room, and it was times like that that things were actually good between them. Did you make that up too? She said, I haven't made anything up, sir. You have to understand. I mean, this happened when she was 12, so nothing's happening with the case. She's not spoken to until she's 17. She's working on a very early memory in her life. And I thought she did a really good job on the stand. It's got to be very hard to remember what you said to an investigator, even in 2008, 2009. It's a long time ago. I couldn't tell you conversations I had. Maybe people might say, well, if your sister was missing, but at the same time, too, it's traumatic and you're worried and you're turning on your dad, essentially. So they really point out the fact that she couldn't recall a lot of things. He asked if Alyssa had an IEP at school, which is kind of a special education goal plan for the year. You set goals for each kid, and then you have these meetings every so often during the school year to see how that child is meeting that goal. It could be one little subject. It could be every area. It just depends on if any learning disability was impacting multiple areas or anything like autism. Seems like Alyssa maybe just had a struggle in some areas, but she did not have anything other than maybe some ADHD. But the defense says that Michael fought to get that IEP and he sued the school district. He asked about Alyssa's grades, and he indicates they weren't good. And she says they actually weren't bad. They were B's, some C's. The defense says some D's. The defense says Sarah told investigators Alyssa hated school. Sarah says she liked attending, but didn't like the work. She liked the social side of it. The defense says you testified Alyssa was happy and everyone liked her. You told Detective Anderson she was big-eyed, and taking in the world. Sarah says, if you say so. The defense says, you said she had an experimental attitude. Again, Sarah says, if you say so. The defense says, Detective Anderson asked you if someone gave her something and told her to take it, that it would make her feel good, that she would probably take it. And Sarah says, I don't know if I said that. The defense says, you said to the investigator she was bordering on being dangerously socially naive. She said, if it's in the report, that's what I said. He said, I'm asking if you said that. And Sarah said she has almost no memory of this conversation. It's been 15 years. The defense says it's convenient the things you remember and what you don't. There was an objection that was sustained for being argumentative. You said when she was with friends, she would get in the car with strangers to get a ride to a party, even if her friends didn't want to go. She said, if that's what the report says. The defense says, you said Alyssa was trusting to a fault, and Sarah agrees. The defense says, you said she had difficulty seeing the consequences of her actions and would give phone numbers and addresses to strangers. That's what I was told, Sarah says. She wasn't a planner, didn't talk about her future. Sarah said, I don't think she knew what she wanted to do yet. The defense asked, did she talk about leaving often? And Sarah said, no, that may have been what I thought at the time. Defense points out, you told police you believe Michael picked you up around 3 p.m., but you now think you got out at 3:30. He was trying to get a hold of Alyssa, and Sarah said, that's what he told me. He asks about the backpack being dumped out and points out there's no sign of a struggle. That was the only sign of disarray. The bed was in place. There were no smells of cleaning materials, no blood anywhere in the house whatsoever. No sign of struggle took place anywhere in that home. Then he moves on to talk about the new truck that Michael got after she went missing. Do you remember talking to Detective Anderson and saying he got that truck to tow quads, which I assume are the four-wheelers? She says she does not remember saying that. After a break, the defense attorney says they showed clips to Sarah during that break and said it's my contention based on her testimony that her dad brainwashed her. She was told these things. He asked the jury see the clips so that he can show them Sarah's demeanor as she's making these statements. The judge denied that request. He asked Sarah if he had her watch the clips over lunch. She says yes. And asked if she remembers saying Alyssa had talked about running away before. She says yes. The defense says, you said you had heard from her friends that she got into the car with strangers. Sarah said, I said she was with her friends, not that they told me. He asks again, you heard from her friends she got into cars with strangers. Did you say her friends said Alyssa got into cars with strangers? And she said, I never saw that myself. He goes over Alyssa being feisty and things like that. He says, when your dad picked you up that day, did you notice any marks or scratches or bruises on your dad? She says, no. You found the note from Alyssa and you said it was odd. Her first letter was capitalized and she never did that. And she said, that's correct. You told Detective Anderson you heard the phone ring when it was allegedly from Alyssa in California. You said you saw the concern in his eyes and he called everyone in her phone, all of her friends trying to find her. He points out Michael was consistently trying to find Alyssa. He would put up flyers, routinely call her friends, said that he was contacted by Phoenix police who asked that they take the flyers down. Sarah said, that's what I was told, that they said to take them down. As time passed, his concerns grew and he was annoyed and frustrated by the way the Phoenix police was handling the case. He wrote letters to the police chief, congressman. He contacted the FBI. She said, I believe so, but I was not a witness to that. She said the trip to California was kind of weird. He left her in the hotel alone a lot because he would say he had things to do which were dangerous. They talk about the surveillance tapes and he asked how long her dad had been doing that. And she said since she was born and even before into the 70s. They talk about the camera in the vent. She said Michael told her not to tell Alyssa about that camera. The defense says you never said this to detectives. She said she has mentioned it on her podcast. The defense says that eventually Alyssa found out about that surveillance camera in the vent and knew about it for years. Sarah said that is not true. It was not for years. They have a back and forth about how the cameras were set up and how you record and all that stuff. The defense says Alyssa would know the camera was there because of a blinking red light. And we know she said that Michael would cover that with electrical tape. You said to the detective the cameras were set up because someone tried to break in while you and Alyssa were home. She said, that's what I believed at the time. He said, you didn't say you believed then. You said, this is what happened, correct? And she said, yes. He asked her about the statement where Michael said he would tell her on his deathbed about Alyssa. He also said he would confess if they would give him a lethal injection within 10 days. But the defense says he said over 50 times over the years he did not do anything to Alyssa. The defense says Michael told you I didn't do it and I'm not going to confess. The defense says you went that day to Starbucks to get a confession. According to the defense, investigators told Sarah without a confession, essentially, this case was stalled. And she said, I don't think they said that to me. They wanted to find her body. And he says, you wanted a confession. And Sarah said, I wanted answers. He said, my answer will be the same even on my deathbed. He said, I can't believe my daughter would think I would do this. She said he said that at the end after he taunted her during that conversation. He asks if Alyssa ever cheated on her boyfriend, and Sarah says, I don't know what their status was. He said within the incident caught on camera with the squealing tires, within weeks, she had a 20-year-old man on the couch. Sarah again says, I don't know the status of her relationships. He asked, do you remember telling investigators that John was a jerk to her, John being Alyssa's ex-boyfriend? And she says, yes. He asked if she ever told investigators that the boyfriend would get violent. And she said, I was told he smashed her finger in a car door. Defense says, do you remember telling investigators you saw him violently grab her and she was embarrassed? She asked to watch that interview for clarification, and she does. She's asked if Alyssa's boyfriend was violent towards her, and Sarah said by the wrist he would grab her. At some point, she had bruises on her cheek and on her body, and Sarah agrees she did. And it's a little different than when you told us that the relationship was fine. Sarah says, I don't remember that. There was a threat to call Child Protective Services if Michael did not allow Alyssa to do certain things. She wanted to get tattoos, a tongue piercing. She thought that Sarah and Michael were boring, but your dad wouldn't let her until she turned 18. Is that correct? And Sarah says yes. The defense asked if she turned the defense team down for a pretrial interview, and she said yes. You talked about Alyssa's jewelry, and it was odd she left it because it was your mother's. They say in 2008, you were asked if she left behind heirlooms. You said she had a set of your mom's jewelry, but it was stolen by a cousin who came to live with them a couple of years before Alyssa went missing. That's different than what you said. He says, were you lying then or are you lying now? There was an objection. He asked, where's your mom's jewelry now? She gets a little emotional and says she is actually wearing a ring of hers on the stand. Then he asks about the cousin, and she said she did not see him take anything. He asks to refresh her recollection and shows her a video. So after she watches, he says, you mentioned a set Alyssa had and it was stolen, a set of jewelry. Sarah says, it seems I was saying that, but I couldn't make it out. The last question by the defense, did you ever say it's weird she didn't take the heirlooms? And Sarah said no. The prosecution said, you said that's what I believe, or that's what I was told. How do you come to these conclusions? For example, of her behavior issues. Sarah said Michael told her these things, and as she got older, she started doing the same things Alyssa was doing, and actually more than what Alyssa was doing. And she realized Alyssa wasn't as out of control as Michael told her she was. He asked if she was advised under the law that she did not have to do a pretrial with the defense, and she says yes. The defense was allowed to ask one quick question, and he says, in 2001, you were 12 and you stay home mostly. She says yes. He said, you were the sensible one, correct? And you told that to Detective Anderson. You said the rules were different for you. You were doing bad things worse than Alyssa. He says in 2001, you weren't doing those things. And she said, no, I was 12. Jury questions. There were a couple. Could you describe your dad's job, girlfriend, any clubs, memberships, churches he attended? She said that he had had no job since she was 6 and he was on disability. He only had a couple of friends as far as she knew. And he actually dated one of Alyssa's teachers until something happened That broke off, and then there were no other women ever brought around. He asked why she described Alyssa as brave, and Sarah said, I didn't realize how brave she was. She chose to stay at that house. She would calm her down if she was scared for little things, like if something was in the closet. The defense says your dad hurt his knee and was collecting disability. Sarah says, that's what I now know. So that was it for Sarah. Coming up, we're going to have some brothers come up who also believe that Michael abused and killed Alyssa. This is going to be a good one to watch because I think this is one of those times where deliberations is going to be very intense. It's hard to know if these jurors can connect the circumstantial dots together. They did in Lori Vallow. The only piece of DNA evidence was the one hair found in the garbage bag. And jurors said that really didn't come into their deliberations because they lived together. So we've seen a lot of convictions on cases where it's all circumstantial. Again, Alec Murdaugh, pretty much a circumstantial case. We had the video there. I think this is going to be interesting. I'm really wanting to see what else comes out. And I think there will be more than I'm anticipating right now. But very interesting stuff. So I'll be back tomorrow. We will finish up day one. There's only a couple of witnesses, but for time's sake, I'm going to cut it off here. And then we will finish up days 2 and 3 by Friday, be all caught up for Monday. So appreciate you guys. We'll see you soon.